Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldun Azhari. I am a correspondent for Arabic media, so I cannot vote for the election in Tokyo, but yet I will moderate this event. It's a great honor to have one of the main candidates, and which is described by some media as a dark horse, which make very good sense because now we are the year of the horse. So there might be some reason why he has declared his candidacy in this year. And our guest basically was a general in the Japanese Defense Forces, and in 2008 he was relieved from his duties because he wrote some article that was interpreted as military intervening in politics. So he has a great experience in military affairs. So that is one of the issues that other candidates don't have at all in common. So maybe that might give him kind of special capabilities to deal with issues now that we hear a lot of reports about the tension between Japan and other countries. So maybe people with experience of military might be better serving in some high post. Other than that, our guest today, he has been leading a political action group based in Tokyo. It's called Gambaru Nippon, and this has been active in doing a lot of political activities, and he wrote some books about his policies and his ideas, and he's very proactive in many issues related to Japan politics and even economic issues. And I heard that he has a full plan for economic affairs in Tokyo election this time, and he might have also other plans for the city in case he wins. And also, according to some polls, he is leading candidate mostly on internet, which is used according to some sources by youth people. And if some analysts say if people go to elections in large number, we might have a big surprise rather than having the candidates of the big political parties winning the election. So we think that some people say we think that this election is open for any result, any possibilities. So we should not really expect anything, even though some candidates have a big popular figures behind them. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our guest today, Mr. Toshio Tamogami. Thank you very much.
よろしいですか。じゃあ皆さんこんにちは。
Hello everyone.
ダークホースの玉上です。
I am Tamogami, the dark horse of this race.
私は自衛官でですね、日本国民でも私はすごく怖い人だと、ガチガチのですね、柔軟性のない人間だと思ってる人もいるようなんですけども、私は本当にいい人なんです。
Because of my background in the self-defense forces, some people have an image of me. Many Japanese people even have an image of me as being very, very rigid and a very frightening, scary person. But in reality, I'm a very nice guy.
今回ですね、東京都知事選にあたって私は福島県の出身なんです。東日本大震災で私の友人もいっぱい亡くなってますし、顔の見える人たちが放射能の風評被害なんかで困ってる人たちもいっぱいいるんですね。で宮城とか福島とか被災地に何十回も足を運びましたけれども、大変な惨状ですよね。ですから東京都が今大変な確率で 地震が来ると言われている中でですね、東京に地震が来たときに震災に強い町にしておいてですね、震災が起きたら直ちに救助できる体制を作って被害をできるだけ少なくしておかなければいけないという思いで今回立候補しました。
In regard to the upcoming Tokyo election, Tokyo gubernatorial election, I would like to begin by saying that I originally am from Fukushima Prefecture. As a result, I have lost many friends in the Great East Japan earthquake. And for the people that are still remaining, I have met many people who are suffering from the negative rumor effects of the negative effects of false rumors about radioactivity. I have actually visited the devastated areas in Fukushima and Miyagi several tens of times, and I've seen how disastrous the situation has been. As a result, when we consider the situation in Tokyo, it has been predicted that there's a very high probability that a very large earthquake will hit Tokyo in the near future. I believe it is paramount that we put together a city that is going to be able to withstand very strong quakes, that is very good at disaster prevention, and in case something terrible happens, that it will be a city that will be able to recover very quickly.
東京は災害に弱いと同時にですね、非常に子どもが生まれにくい、子どもを育てにくいということで、子どもが生まれる率が少ないんですね。それとお年寄りが一人で暮らしているという例が多くて、これがおじいちゃんおばあちゃんの一人暮らしがどんどん増えて、年を取って孤独感とか寂しさを味わっているというの例が多くてですね、こういったことを子どもがちゃんと生まれてきちんと日本国民としての自信と誇りを持って育つように、またお年寄りが一人暮らしで寂しさとか孤独感を味わうことがないようにですね、昔の日本のこの町内会とかですね、自治会とか、あるいは子ども会 PTA の会とか、そういった組織が緩やかにつながったようなですね、本当に困った時はみんなが助け合えるような街にしたいというふうに思っています。
Tokyo is described as a city that is ill prepared for a great natural disaster if it occurs. Tokyo has also been criticized as being a city in which it is very difficult for young people to give birth to children or to raise children. It has also been described as a city where many elderly people find themselves living all alone and suffering from feelings of isolation, great sadness and loneliness. I believe, therefore, that we must bring about change and create Tokyo into a city where it will be easy for children to be raised, where children can be raised in an environment where they can feel confident about their roots, where they can feel pride in their nation. It will also have to become a city where old persons will no longer have to feel isolated and alone. In other words, what I'm thinking of is trying to recreate Tokyo of the old Japan. In other words, in previous times, we saw in Japan many community associations, neighborhood associations, PTAs, also children's associations. In other words, these were ways to loosely tie people together so that people never felt alone.
時間がないんで私と他の候補者との違いをですね、4点ほど申し上げたいと思います。一つは経済政策が、他の候補者はあまり言ってないんですが、私の経済政策はタモガミクスと呼んでおります。
I'm limited for time, so I'd like to focus on several points. One is I would like to talk about the ways that I differ from my opponents in this upcoming election. There are four differences that I believe I have with my opponents. One is that in regard to economic policy, I have put together a very clear economic policy, and most of the other candidates have not talked about economics at all. I refer to my economic policy as Tamogamomics.
タモガミクス、まず第一にですね、今4月に消費税が上がりますので、景気の腰が折れると困りますので、政府もいろいろ手を打つと思いますけれども、東京都もですね、景気対策を打ちたいというふうに思っています。
In regard to Tamogamomics, thank you, Tamogamix. Of course, one of the things that concerns Japan is the fact that the consumption tax will be raised in April. It is going to be very, very important that the positive momentum of the economy does not falter as a result. The national government, of course, is taking many measures to ensure that this does not happen, but I believe that Tokyo also must put together some economic policies to prevent this from happening.
消費税のアップに連動させて、都民税の減税とそれから公共事業の拡大を2兆円規模で実施をしたいと考えています。
Very specifically, I believe that in conjunction with the raising of the consumption tax, I believe that we must put forward a decrease in the Tokyo Metropolitan Tax. Also, I believe that we should increase public works spending. As a result, this will be a 2 trillion positive infusion into the economy.
それと日本はGDP は回復基調に入ったんですけれども、まだ日本の会社は 99% 以上が中小企業で、これが日本の経済力、技術力を支えていますので、この中小企業の経営が今大変苦しいんですね。原発のほとんどを止めてますから、年間4兆円余計に火力発電用の油を買わなきゃいけないということで、電気料金も 15% ほど上がってますので、この中小企業の支援策ですね、これを実行していきたいと思います。
With Abenomics, we have seen a recovery of the GDP of the Japanese economy. However, it is said that 99% of the companies in Japan are small and medium enterprises. It is among the small and medium enterprises where the foundation of the Japanese economy, the technological background of the nation lies. However, these small and medium enterprises are suffering tremendously in recent years, in part because the nuclear power plants have stopped. We have seen that the nation has had to bear a 4 trillion yen increase in purchasing in regard to importing more oil from abroad. We have seen that electricity prices have gone up 15%. These are also all tremendous burdens on small and medium enterprises. Therefore, we need to put together measures to support these smaller companies.
2番目の違いはですね、靖国参拝の問題に対する姿勢ですね。でこの靖国神社についてはですね、ぜひ皆さんに右往左往と訳さないでもらいたいんですけど、別の訳をただの日本人が意図している正しい訳をしてもらいたいんですが、靖国神社に安倍総理が参拝をする、これに私以外の他の3候補は反対ですけども、私はこれ靖国神社に参拝賛成で、これを乗り越えないと日本の自分の国を自分で守るという体制ができないんではないかと私は思っています。
The second area where I differ from my political rivals in this election is in regard to the praying, the stance that we take toward praying at the Yasukuni Shrine. I would like to ask that you, in the foreign media, please translate the Yasukuni Shrine matter correctly. In other words, to reflect the intentions of the Japanese people. What I mean by this is that when Prime Minister Abe prays at the Yasukuni Shrine, in regard to this, my three other main opponents oppose this paying his respects, Prime Minister paying his respects at Yasukuni Shrine. I, on the other hand, very much support this idea. I believe that if we cannot overcome this issue, we will not be able to become a country that will be able to defend our own nation.
3つ目はですね、外国人に地方の参政権を与える法案、これ私は絶対反対ですけれども、他の候補はこれ賛成しています。
The other third area in which I differ from my opponents is in regard to the issue of giving voting rights to foreign persons living in Japan in local elections. The other three main candidates are in favor of such an idea. I'm completely against this idea.
4つ目はですね、私は原発を使いながら日本のエネルギー需要を満たしていくべきであると考えています。原発日本は50年使ってまして、50年間でその原発運転中の放射能事故で亡くなった人はいないという実績から見ればですね、原発を安全に運用しながら電力を供給していくことが可能だというふうに考えています。これが他の候補者の原発廃止というのとはまた大きく違っていると思います。
The fourth area in which I differ from my opponents is in regard to the use of nuclear energy. I believe that the use of nuclear power plants will fulfill a vital role in meeting Japan's energy needs. When we look at the history of nuclear power plant operation in Japan, we see that over the past half century, 50 years, nuclear power plants have been operated and there has been no fatal accidents during the operation of these power plants. Therefore, I believe that safe operations are possible in the future. This is where I differ from my opponents, my main three opponents who call for eliminating nuclear power plants.
あとオリンピックはパラリンピック、できるだけ盛大にやりたいと思ってます。でオリンピックスタジアムとかはもうですね、 後々使うことを考えて、大震災の避難所として使えるとか、水とか食料とかが備蓄できるような形にして、また選手村も後々住宅として使えるように、私は3世代型のですね、昔の日本のようなおじいちゃんおばあちゃんが近くにいるという形態が望ましいと思ってますので、そういったことに使えるような、形でオリンピックの選手村も整備したいというふうに考えています。
In regard to the Olympics and Paralympics, my fundamental feeling is that we should celebrate this in a very grand way. In regard to building the Olympic Stadium, I believe we should build it in mind. We should build it with having in mind the idea that we will use it over the long term. It can be used in the future as an evacuation center in the case of a large earthquake. We can use this stadium facility to store immense amounts of water and food supplies. Also, in regard to the Olympic Village, I believe it is important to also think of the future use after the Olympics. And the future use that I envision is to have these Olympic Village housing become residential housing for the people of Tokyo. The ideal that I have in mind is to have 3 generations of people living very close to each other. In other words, a nuclear family, but also having grandparents very close by. That is a kind of residential housing that I would like to see realized.
強くたくましく、そしてみんなに優しいふるさとと言われるような東京の街を作るために、東京都民を守るために全力を尽くしたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
Therefore, I feel very strongly that I would like to create a Tokyo that is strong and vigorous and yet very kind to others. In other words, the image that I have of Tokyo is furusato, which can be translated as hometown or home village. This is the kind of Tokyo I would like to see realized. I will do my very best to protect the citizens of Tokyo. Thank you.
いいです。はい。
Thank you very much for this presentation. We would like to open the floor for questions and answers. It has been the tradition of this club to allow the journalists to ask first, and after we finish with the question from journalists, we open the floor for everybody else. First question.
これから質疑応答に移りたいと思います。はじめは記者の方からお願いいたしまして、その後時間を許すようでございましたら、一般の方からも質問をお受けいたします。
Tamogami-san, I'm Henry Stokes. I'm a freelance journalist here, working on a book on the black ships. And I'd like to ask you about your view of the historic role played by the black ships that came here in 1853. Were the black ships a good thing for Japan, in that they paved the way for very elaborate relations between the United States and Japan today? Or were they a bad thing for Japan, in that they deprived this country of its own leadership? Which side do you tend towards, if I may ask? Thank you very much.
フリーのストークスと申します。今私は本を書いているところでございます。その本のテーマは1853年に日本に来ました黒船ということでございます。この黒船についてどういうふうにお考えでございますでしょうか。つまりこれは日本にとって良いものだったんでしょうか、それとも悪いものだったんでしょうか。つまり良いものと言いますのは、やはり今の日米関係、良い日米関係にいずれつないだものなんでございましょうか。それともやはり黒船が来たために日本は自分のリーダーを育てられなかった、自国のリーダーシップが作られなかった悪いものだったというふうに思いますでしょうか。
黒船が来たことがいいか悪いかということはそれはどっちでもないと思います。でいずれにしろこの世界がだんだん交通手段の発達と通信手段の発達によって狭くなりますから、いずれそういう時期は来たんだと思います。したがってそういった国際関係が密接になる中で日本がどういう付き合いをしていくかということであるというふうに思います。だから私はそれは時代の流れの当然の帰結であっていいとか悪いとかいうことではないと思います。
Thank you for your question. In regard to the black ships, I do not think it was necessarily either a good thing or a bad thing. What I'm saying by this is that as we look at world history, we saw that the world became smaller and smaller as advances in technology made transportation, traffic, and communication much advanced communication, advanced traffic and transportation. As a result, it was that the black ships eventually came to Japan, but if it had not been the black ships, it would have been someone else. So the question that we must face is not look back and say, was it a good thing or a bad thing, but rather, how should Japan deal with the rest of the world, because that day would have come in any event. So I believe that from a historical context, it was something that just came, that happened, and it would have happened in some form or other, and so we cannot look back and say it was a good or a bad thing.
Thank you. Next question. Yes.
Good afternoon. Aaron Sheldrick, Reuters. Could you explain more why you're opposed to letting foreign residents vote in elections? Thank you.
ロイターズでございます。先ほど外国人の地方参政権を反対しているということでございますが、これについてもっと詳しく説明していただけますでしょうか。
はい。日本国民ってこの外国人に対して非常に寛容だと思います。いろいろもうお客様をもてなさなきゃいけないというおもてなしの精神とか思いやりの精神を持ってますから、それで日本は今7000ぐらいの島で成り立っているわけですね。で東京にも私は3日前に行ってきましたけど、伊豆の大島っていうのがあります。人口が8300人ほどです。でここにですね、外国人がもし1000人以上住み着いて選挙権を持つことになれば、我が国の領土である伊豆の大島がですね、実質的に外国に奪われたと同じような状況に私はなってしまうんではないかと思うんですね。ですから日本がきちんと日本人の意思で日本の領土は管理していくということから考えれば、そういうものは外国人は認めるべきでないと私は思っています。
I believe that the Japanese people are by nature very, very welcoming and kind to foreigners. We have these words such as omotenashi, so hospitality. We have a tendency to treat foreigners as guests. At the same time, we must look at the practicalities. Japan, the archipelago, is composed of about 7,000 islands. 3 days ago, I visited Izu Oshima, which is a very large island that belongs to the territory of Tokyo. At present, the population of this island is 8,300 people, but just hypothetically, if 1,000 people, foreign persons, were to come and live in Oshima and they were allowed to be given the right to vote, it could be that they could very much the result could be that it might be basically that it would be a de facto giving up of our territory to a foreign nation. In other words, a foreign nation would de facto effectively control it.
1万人だ。1000人って言った僕。伊豆の大島の人口8300人だとすれば、それより多い1万人の人口、1000人とは間違いですね。
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said if 1,000 people came. What I meant was that right now the population of Oshima is 8,300 people. But if we had 10,000 people come, foreigners come and live there, and they would basically be able to control the election, then we would basically have a de facto situation where it would be de facto a foreign country taking over this island. Therefore, from the point of view of the Japanese people taking responsibility to manage their own territories, I believe that the right to vote of foreigners in regional elections should not be permitted.
Michael Penn of the Shingetsu News Agency. One issue which gathered some international attention last year in Tokyo was the rise of a certain group called the Zaitokukai, which has been portrayed in the foreign media and as well as in some of the Japanese media as a hate group. And in fact, they have held up signs saying things like, the good Koreans and the bad Koreans, let's kill them all. My question is, as if you become governor of Tokyo, what would be your policy to clamp down on hate speech or acts of discrimination or violence against Korean or Chinese communities?
新月ニュースエージェンシーのペンと申します。昨年から、国際、海外メディアが注目しているテーマなんでございますが、これは在特会 在特会のその存在でございます。よくその英語の新聞ではヘイトグループというふうに言われているわけなんでございますが、つまりこういうようなそのメンバーたちはいろんな看板というんですか、サインを持って行進するんでございますが、そのサインにはいい韓国人、いいコリアン、朝鮮人でしょうか、悪い韓国人、朝鮮人、みんな殺しましょうというようなことを書いてある看板を持っているんでございますが、都知事になられましたら、このようなヘイトグループ、またその在日の中国人、韓国人、朝鮮人に対するその差別的な扱い、あるいはその暴力に対してどう対応されますでしょうか。
暴力はもちろんいけないことだし、あまりこのヘイトスピーチ動画が過ぎたものだとですね、それは日本人としての品格を失いますから、そういうのはやっぱり私はやるべきではないと思います。ただ向こうがやっていることに対しても日本は文句言わなきゃいけないと思いますね。総理大臣の顔がついたなんですか、写真をですね、それを踏みつけたり破いたり、あるいは燃やしたり、日の丸を焼いたりですね、韓国なんか散々やってますよね。だからそういうことを、だからうちもやめるからあなたたちもやめてください、そんなことはということだと思いますね。日本人はとにかく自分だけ修正しようとする非常に健全な国民だと私は思うんです。非常に控えめなんですね。だから控えめだと控えめでない人たちがどんどん出てくるっていうのが今までの歴史ですから、だからこちらも控えるからあなたたちも控えてくれませんかと、それはということを私は言おうと思いますね。
Fundamentally, of course, anything of a violent nature is something that should not be allowed. And I believe that if hate speech is something that goes beyond a certain point, then that calls into question the very dignity or integrity of the Japanese people. So I believe that should not be allowed either. At the same time, when I see similar activities being done by the other side, I believe that Japan should speak up and point out their dissatisfaction about such things. For example, we have seen instances where the Prime Minister's face in a photo has been trampled upon or ripped apart or set on fire. Sometimes we have seen the Japanese flag being set on fire. I think the Japanese people have a tendency, a natural characteristic, to always be rather modest and it's in a sense, it's a very healthy way in that if someone points out that Japanese people are doing something wrong, they feel we should do something. Japanese people immediately think we should therefore correct our actions. However, this being modest and humble, if you go too far, you find that the more humble and modest you are, the other side becomes actually more aggressive. So I think at some point we must have a conversation and say, we will hold back on what we are doing, but the other side must do that as well. You must both restrain yourselves.
FB.
Hello, my name is Harumi Ozawa from AFP. I also would like to ask you about voting rights for foreign residents. You say that you want to make Tokyo a strong and kind city for all of its citizens. However, you mean Tokyo can be not kind to. Do you mean Tokyo can be not kind to foreign residents? You mean that foreign residents are not people who care about?
AFP 通信でございます。先ほどのその外国人の参政権についてということでございますが、やはり日本を強い都市、そしてまた人に優しい都市に作りたいというふうにさせたいというふうにおっしゃったんでございますが、しかしながらその対象は外国人ではないと、外国人はその優しくしなきゃいけない相手ではないというふうにお考えなんでございますでしょうか。
外国人は優しくない。
その
これはですね、その日本国民と外国人がですね、区別されるのはこれは当然ですよ。それを外国人にも日本国民と同じ権利を全部認める、そんな国ありませんよ、世界に。
I fundamentally would like to explain that to treat foreign persons to make no distinction between foreign persons and Japanese persons, I think it is only natural, that there is a distinction between foreign persons and Japanese persons. There is, I don't believe, any country in the world that gives all of the rights of country citizens to foreign residents as well.
Are you a journalist? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Yujiro Taniyama from JapanBroadcasting.net. I have two questions for Mr. Tamogami. One is a question regarding social welfare to increase the birth rate of Tokyo, and one more is a question regarding the U.S. military base in Yokota. ここからちょっと日本語で喋らせていただきたいんですが、一つは、高見先生、東京は日本で一番若者が多い都市です。そして、20代、30代、40代の働くママたちが、赤ちゃんをいっぱい産もうと、そしてストロングな家族を作ろうという気持ち、そういう東京になればですね、日本全体も高くなると思います。強くなると思います。そういった中、玉上都知事が誕生したらどういうそのお母さんにとって、その社会福祉政策、今も8000人以上の待機児童がいますが、そこはどうやって解消されるのか。そしてもう一つは2020年に東京オリンピックがございます。今羽田と成田しかありませんけれども、その2つでは足りないと私は考えております。横田米軍基地、日本の、制空権は今、米軍が持っておりますが、玉上都知事になったら米軍基地、横田米軍基地は米軍から完全にこの返還を石原都知事もできなかったことですが、それを要求されるのか、それともこの反民反韓でまずオリンピックに間に合わせるのか、その2点についてお願いいたします。Thank you very much.
So, in regard to the first question, certainly if Tokyo can become a city where young women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s can feel encouraged and wish to have children and raise children, then I think that would be the impetus for the revival of the Japanese economy. But what exactly will you do as governor to encourage women to want children? In other words, we have 8,000 children or more on waiting lists for daycare centers. What exactly do you intend to do in terms of social welfare policies to deal with the birth rate? And the second question has to do with the U.S. military Yokota base. In 2020, we're going to have the Olympics. I believe that having two airports, Haneda and Narita, are not going to be enough to meet the eventual demand that we will see for the Olympics. What will you therefore think about doing with the Yokota air base? At present, the U.S. Forces control the air rights. And although Ishihara, governor, tried to have the 100% return of the Yokota Air Force Base back to Tokyo, he was unsuccessful. Will you try to make a similar appeal effort, or will you try at least to get a half civilian, half military use of Yokota base by the Olympics?
はい、子育て支援策としてはですね、今2万3000人の待機児童が全国にいて、8100人が東京にいるということで、女性の社会進出が進んで働きたいというお母さんが多いわけです。でこういったお母さんが子供を預けられるように保育所、託児所、こういったものを整備していきたいというふうに思っています。間に合うように整備したいと。でこの時ですね、今横浜市に子育てコンシェルジェというシステムがあるんだそうです。これは子育てを終えた45歳から60歳ぐらいのお母さんを各地に配置をしてですね、この若い女性が朝2時間だけ預けたいとか、夕方3時間だけ預けたい、昼間だけ預けたいとか、そのニーズがあるとですね、この8100人は実際は8100人にならないらしいんですよね。で隣のおばさんで預かってあげたいという人がいるからというような紹介もあったりしてですね、でそういうことで東京もその子育てコンシェルジェというシステムを真似たらどうかなというふうに思ってます。そこまでもう一つありますか。
In regard to being able to create policies that will support the needs of working women, I think this is a very, very important thing indeed. It has been said that some 23,000 children are on waiting lists for nursing care or daycare centers throughout Japan, and as you pointed out, over 8,000 in Tokyo. In other words, these numbers reflect the fact that many women are very eager to work but do not have a place to leave their children with. Of course, as a result, I believe it is of paramount importance that we establish new daycare or nursing care centers as quickly as possible. At the same time, I would like to learn from the examples of other cities. For example, in Yokohama, there was a system called the Yokohama Concierge System, and this is a system where former mothers or mothers whose children are grown now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s basically are register and they are paired up with young women who want to leave their children for maybe not the entire day as with a daycare center, but for a couple of hours in the morning or a couple of hours in the evening. In other words, basically having in a sense, a good, trusted neighbor who has experience with children take the child on for a few hours. In other words, what I'm saying is that we can learn from this example and perhaps also establish a Tokyo concierge system.
これまでは働く女性に対して子育て支援ということを考えてきたんですけども、一方でやっぱり家庭にあって専業主婦として次の世代を担う子どもたちを育てたいというお母さんもいっぱいいるわけです。だからそういった専業主婦にも何らかの経済的支援が得られるようなことを考えていきたいと思います。例えば都営アパートに住んだ時に子供が1人いれば家賃を3万円安くしますとか、2人いればその倍安くしますとかですね、そういったことを考えて子育てにあまり経費がかからないということを考えていきたいと思います。
I also would like to take a broader view of trying to help women as they struggle with child-rearing activities. Until now, when we talk about supporting women with children, the main focus has been on trying to provide support so that women will be able to work outside of the home, perhaps full-time or part-time. However, I believe that there are many women who would like to be housewives, who would not want to work, but who would want to really focus and devote their time on raising their children for a while. And I believe that some kind of a support system needs to be extended so that economic assistance, financial assistance can be given to such women. For example, in regard to metropolitan city run or operated apartment buildings, if the resident has a small child, then that person could see a decrease in the rent by 30,000 yen. If the person has two children, could see a decrease by twice that much, 60,000 yen. In other words, to try to make child rearing less economically, financially burdensome, I think is a very important thing to consider.
女性はどちらでも人生選べるということですね。私は女性には優しいんです。
What I'm saying is that we would like to offer women all kinds of options. As you can see, I'm very, very kind and gentle towards women.
あと、子育てコンシェルジェというのがあるからですね、そういう意味では高齢者、障害者コンシェルジェとかですね、高齢者とか障害者とかこの社会的な弱い立場にある人たちがですね、困った時にすぐに相談できるというようなシステムを作ってはどうかなというふうに思っています。
I spoke earlier about the Yokohama, or what I'm hoping for is a Tokyo child-rearing concierge system being implemented. I also think that there are other people who are not the most strong people in society, for example, the disabled or the elderly, who could perhaps also benefit from such a system. In other words, when such persons find themselves facing a difficulty, it would be nice if there were a system in place where they could immediately go to ask for help and advice.
これは拉致被害者なんかについても同じだと思ってます。
I believe that a similar approach should be taken for the victims, the families of the victims of abductions by North Korea.
それから東京に行くな。横田基地はですね、離発着枠については相当余裕があります。現実に私は航空自衛官だったからよく分かってますけども、ですからとりあえずは民航機がですね、あそこを離発着使えるようにしてくれという調整をしたいというふうに思いますね。
In regard to the use of Yokota Air Base, I know that in terms of landing and takeoff, because of my background as in the Air Self-Defense Forces, I know that they have great leeway. In other words, they have a great deal of space available for more landings and takeoffs from that base. As a result, I think the first step is to ask at least that for the civilian or private sector planes be able to use the base.
She's first. All in one time. So ladies first.
すいません、ジャパンタイムズの三重と言います。2点質問がございまして、玉上さんはですね、ネットで非常に人気で、それがちょっといわゆる新聞のその世論調査ちょっと結果が異なることになっているんですけれども、それについての原因というか理由をどうお考え感じなのかちょっと教えていただきたいのと、あと昨日銀座で行ったですね、討論会スピーチではその歴史教育について、安倍政権を支持すると、でそれを東京でも遂行していくというふうにおっしゃったんですが、具体的にはどのようにお考えなのか、どのように東京都として歴史教育を行っていくのか教えてください。
I am Mia from the Japan Times. I have two questions. First of all, as was pointed out by the MC, according to the internet polls, you rank very highly. You have great popularity. Those results differ significantly from the polls that we see that are run by newspapers. Can you tell us how you analyze this difference? What do you think the reasons for your popularity in the internet is? And the second question has to do with the fact that yesterday, when you gave a speech in Ginza, you touched upon the topic of education about history, and that you supported Prime Minister Abe's approach to historical education in Japan, and that you would like to implement or bring in some of these ideas into education in Tokyo as well. Could you be more specific? How exactly would you see or change or deal with how history is taught in Tokyo schools?
ネットでの人気は私がダントツ一番なんですけどもですね、他の追随を許さないぐらいだけれども私には組織票っていうのがないんですよね。他のお三方には自民党がついたり民主党がついたり、あるいは共産党社民党がついたりしてるわけですけども、多分カウントできないんですよね。日本もネット選挙解禁になってまだ間がありませんので、その辺がマスコミの方々がどう読んでるのか私はよく分かりませんけども、あと少しは玉紙をできれば通したくないというマスコミの風潮があるんじゃないですかね、おそらく。それが原因で離れてるんではないかというふうに思います。それから2番目のこの、安倍政権がですね、安倍政権と一番親和性があるのは多分私だと思うんですよね。自民党もですね、松戸さんを支持するのは安倍総理も相当苦しいんだと思う。内心はですね、本当は玉上さんに通ってもらいたいと思ってるんじゃないかと私は思ってますけどもですね、そういうことで、安倍政権とこの同じ歴史教育はですね、国家間歴史観、日本はそんなに悪い国じゃなかったですよと、よその国と比べて日本がそんなに悪い国だったですかっていうと、私はそうは思わないし、安倍さんも当然そうは思っていないと思うんですね。だから今まで日本はどういう歴史を教えてきたかというとですね、戦勝国の歴史を教えてきたんですよね。歴史は誰が作るか、戦勝国が作るんです。戦争に勝ったアメリカが一時日本の歴史を作り変えるわけですよ。だけど独立をしたらどこかの時点で我々日本国民が考える誇りある歴史を取り戻さなければですね、国家はやがて衰退をすると私は思います。だから安倍総理のこの靖国参拝を含めですね、日本がこの諸外国と比べてそんなに日本が悪い国ではなかったし、その日本だけが悪く言われる筋合いもないという日本の素晴らしいところを、中国と同じように自分の国のいいところだけ教えていけばいいんじゃないですかね。
First of all, in regard to the results of the internet polls, actually, it's not that I'm very popular. I am incredibly popular. None of the other candidates even come close to my rankings in the internet polls. But the reason, perhaps, that there are different results when you look at the newspaper polls is because, first of all, I do not have any large organizations, political parties supporting me. The other three major candidates are backed by the LDP, the DPJ, the Japanese Communist Party, or the Social Democratic Party. Of course, it's very, very difficult also to do an accurate counting of the internet polls, partly because the use of the internet for elections during election campaigns has only recently been approved. I think there might also be a tendency among the major Japanese media to not want Tamogami to win, and maybe that is starting to affect some of the newspaper-run polls. In regard to the second question about the Abe administration, I would like to point out that probably my policies are the closest or have the highest affinity to the Abe administration's policies. In fact, although the LDP has officially declared their support for Mr. Masazoe, I think in their heart of hearts that is a very, very difficult decision for them, and they're actually suffering as a result. I think they would really honestly want to support me openly. And the reason for this is that in regard to how we view history, how we view the nation, I believe that fundamentally, I think we share the same idea, which is that Japan is not such a terrible or demonic country. Compared to other nations of the world, is Japan somehow uniquely horrible or terrible or demonic? I think both I and Prime Minister Abe feel that the answer is no. So this leads to the question, why is there this idea that Japan is somehow unique among the nations of the world as in being just a horrible country? And I think it is because there was the view of history that was painted by the victorious nations. This is something that happens in history and is something that perhaps is unavoidable, but over time, as a nation regains its independence and eventually becomes able to stand again on its own 2 feet, then it must at some point be able to regain a sense of confidence and pride in one's own nation. Otherwise, that nation is doomed to disappear and fade. I think, therefore, this is why Prime Minister Abe has taken the actions that he has. For example, as visiting the Yasukuni Shrine, he wants to convey his idea that Japan is not somehow uniquely horrible as a nation, and that there is no justification for this view that Japan alone of the nations of the world is somehow horrible and terrible. Perhaps in regard to education, historical education in Japan, we should follow the leadership of China and teach that our country is surpassing all other nations.
My name is Crowell, and I'm a freelance writer. I would like to draw on your experience as the commander of the Japanese Air Force to ask you about the defense of the southern Kuril Islands. Do you think there are enough air assets in the region, Japanese assets, when you consider there are only 20 F-15s at Naha, a crowded joint civilian airport, whereas the Chinese can put perhaps a couple hundred high-performance aircraft from a half a dozen bases close to the Senkaku Island? And did you ever raise this concern when you were the chief of staff, and what was the response from the government?
ごめんなさい。はい、フリーランスのものでございます。国幕僚長、でのそのご経験に基づいていろいろ質問させていただきたいんでございますが、防衛でございますが、南千歳諸島についてでございますが、日本は十分なそのアセットと資産っていうのを聞いているのでございますが、有していると思いますでしょうか。この防衛をその実現するために、今その民間空港を利用されているのでございますが、これ非常に混雑しているところでございますし、またその南千歳って You said the southern 北方領土、それだけ北方領土のことでございますね。はい。千島諸島というふうにYou asked for about the
Southern
Ryukyu, because you mentioned Senkaku later, and I was a little not sure. Okay, すみません。尖閣諸島を含めるその南西のでございますでしょうか。尖閣諸島の周辺ということでございますが、今その地域におきましてはその F15 は20機ぐらいしかないと思いますし、またそこに利用しております民間空港は非常に混雑しているということでございます。実際に何かあったときにどのくらい早くその対応できるか、スクランブル発進できるかということだと思うのでございます。それに比べますと中国では何百の戦闘機をすぐ離陸させることができると思うのでございますが、そういう体制におきまして尖閣諸島に何かあったときに十分にその防衛できるかどうか、ということでございます。そしてまた、ご自分がその幕僚長をお務めになったときにそのような何か似たような状況というのはご経験されてますのでしょうか。
後の質問から答えると、私が自衛隊にいるときにですね、尖閣諸島に中国の漁船が来て上陸するとかいう話はあって対処したことがあります。で最初の質問のですね、中国が何百機も飛ばしてきたら守れるのかと、何百機も飛ばしてくることは多分ないと思いますね。数だけ見てるとそう思うんですけどもですね、私は詳しくしてこれあんまり喋ると捕まっちゃうといけないんでですね喋れないんですけども、中国は尖閣支配する能力は今のところないと思います。だからそんなことはしてくることはないですね。
In regard to your second question first, when I was in the self-defense forces, I did experience a situation where there was not Chinese airplanes, but Chinese fishing boats, and there was some idea of their trying to land on the island, and I did deal with this issue. In regard to your first question, and you're pointing out that China does have the capability to send several hundreds of aircraft into this area, I do not think that will actually ever happen. If you look at the numbers, and I can see that just on the face of it, that possibility does seem like a real possibility, but I know the details, and although if I speak about the details in more detail, I would probably be arrested. I cannot go into details, but I have knowledge of the nature of the Chinese defenses, and I can say quite firmly that China does not have at present the military capacity to take over the Senkaku Islands.
今中国が尖閣でやってることは情報戦の一種なんですよね。日本を挑発して戦争しようとは全く思ってないと思います。それは能力がないからですけども、日本政府にですね、安倍総理に自衛隊を使ってこれを撃退すると決断されるのが一番困るんです。だから日本に自衛隊を動かすことを決断させることなく、戦争になったら大変だから尖閣中国にくれてやったらどうだというふうに日本国民をして日本政府をして思わせるための情報戦をやってるだけですね。
I would like to explain that what China is doing in regard to the Senkaku Islands is basically they're trying to wage an information war. In other words, the Chinese government has no real intent to try to provoke Japan into beginning a war with Japan. The reason for this is they do not have the capacity, the noryoku, the capacity, the ability to wage such a war. Therefore, the Chinese government would find it very problematic if things got out of hand and Prime Minister Abe decided to actually mobilize the self-defense forces in this regard. They do not want things to go that far by any means. What they do want instead is to again wage this information war where many Japanese people will feel very negatively about the Senkaku Islands and perhaps try to pull back from the Senkaku Islands. That is what they are aiming to do, not really wage a military war.
中国の軍人もですね、このことは十分承知していると思います。
And I believe that persons in the Chinese military are very well aware of this reality.
Thank you. Andrew Staples, Editorial Director, Economist, Corporate Network. I wonder if I could ask you to share your views on immigration, particularly as it relates to Tokyo. At the one level, the perceived need for low or unskilled workers for the Tokyo Olympics, and at the other end, highly skilled workers in high-tech, knowledge-intensive industries. Would you, for example, be supportive of designating Tokyo as a special economic zone? Thank you.
エコノミストでございます。移民政策についてお伺いしたいと思うんでございます。これからオリンピックを目指しているわけで、実現するわけでございますので、これによって低賃金で、そしてあんまり技能を有してないような労働者が必要になるというふうに思っております。また一方では、IT 産業などでは非常に熟練、非常に技術を有しているような方たちも必要になると思うんでございますが、そういう2つの側面から見まして、東京を特別経済区に指定するということなどは考えていらっしゃいますでしょうか。
はい、いろんな形での特区を作って、実験をすることはいいことだと思います。で、高連度の人とか、あるいは高い技術力を持っている人はですね、それは日本のために頑張ってくれると思いますので、そういう人は受け入れてもいいんではないかなと私は思っています。ただいわゆる日本に金稼ぎに来るという人たちを受け入れるのは相当制約をつけたらいいと私は思います。それはなぜかって言ったら、今日本はデフレなんですよね。日本人がまともに就職できないんです。これでよそから来て安い賃金で働くと言ったら、日本の青少年は学校を卒業してももっと就職しにくくなるわけですよね。だからやっぱりそういう時期によると思いますね。経済が回復をして労働力が足りないという事態になればですね、そういうことはありえますけど、昨日のテレビでもですね、高齢化社会を迎えて日本は労働力が足りなくなるとか言ってるんですけど、これ冗談じゃないんですよね。労働力が余ってるんですよ。就職できないんですから。ですからこういう時期にあまり移民を受け入れては私はいけないんではないかと。経済が回復した後に考えるべきことだと思っています。
I believe that the establishment of different economic zones to try various ideas is a very, very fundamentally good idea. And I believe in regard to the second category of workers you described, people with skills and high academic background, I think if they would be kind enough to contribute and work hard for the Japanese economy, that is something that we should consider trying to increase their numbers in Japan. However, in regard to the first category of workers that you mentioned, basically people who are coming just to earn money to take back home, then I think for those people, I think we must consider putting some kinds of limitation on their numbers. And the reason for that is because Japan is still in a deflationary situation. What we are seeing is a situation where many Japanese find it very difficult to gain work. We see many young people graduating from school and still being unable to find employment. If, on top of the current difficulties that they have to face a situation where they are competing with even lower wage laborers from other countries, I think it will be very, very damaging for their futures. So I'm not necessarily against bringing in such laborers, but I think you have to look at the timing. When the economy recovers and we do see a true labor shortage, then I think that might be a possibility to consider. However, for example, last night I was watching a television program and there was some debate and someone was saying that with the graying of Japanese society, we're going to see a lack of people who can work, a shrinkage of the labor force. And I completely disagree with that view. The reality is that there are so many people who are seeking work who cannot find work.
Yes. 安全保障機関学会という防衛団体のワシントン特派員のようなことをしている吉川と申すものでございます。よろしくお願いします。私昨年12月に東日本大震災に関する本を書きまして、松島元総監ですとか先隊の松原武さんにお渡ししてあるんですが、その時いくつか提案してまして、その2点に関して玉上先生のご意見を伺いたいと思います。第1点が石原慎太郎先生も頑張られたんですが、東京都と横田基地との防災協力関係、これがまだ実は十分じゃないのではないか。東京都とどこですか？横田の米軍との関係というか、東日本大震災の時も米軍と自衛隊非常にうまく協力できたんですが、米軍と日本の警察消防の関係ぎくしゃくしてたような話をいくつも聞いておりまして、でそこら辺に関して静岡や高知が東海大地震や南海トラフの地震のために米軍とのかなり大掛かりな協力を築こうとしていて、あと左の人の反対側でそこまでいかないんですが、沖縄と神奈川が国を介さずに米軍と話し合うチャンネルぐらいは持っていると。でここら辺都知事になられたらどういうふうにされたいとお考えかということは1点。あともう1点が911の後アメリカ政府が導入したインシデントコマンドシステムというシステム、これホワイトハウスから末端の消防署までつないで命令と横の情報の共有化ができるシステムなんですが、これアメリカはそのテロや地震の時だけではなくて普通に州の名産品の展示会をやるようなその実行にも使うことがある。このインシデントコマンドシステムを改良して日本政府やインシデントコマンドシステム、はい、これを日本の政府や東京都に持ち込むにあたってはまず例えば東京オリンピックの実行に関して部分的でもこのシステムを持ち込んでもいいのではないか、この2点は私本の中で提案したんですが、これ都知事になったらどのようにお考えか教えていただければ幸いです。
My name is Yoshikawa. I work in the security field, and I was based in Washington. Last December, I wrote a book about the East Japan earthquake and its aftermath, and I made many proposals about how we can learn from this earthquake. And I'd like to mention two of the proposals I made in my book, and I would like to ask your opinion about these 2 points. One has to do with in summary, being able to better coordinate the way that the self-defense forces and the U.S. military were able to have good coordination, and sometimes it is thought that if they are able to communicate directly and not have to go through the local governments, the system works much smoother. What do you think about doing this on a national level? We have seen this kind of good relationship being discussed in Shizuoka, also between Okinawa and the Kanagawa governments. What would you think about bringing this to a national level? Second point has to do with something that we saw after 9/11 in the United States. It's something called an incident command network. system, incident command system. It's a system where there's a channel of communication where from the President's office right down to the fire department level, you can give out information and commands, directives very directly. This is something that would be good not only for terrorist attacks and earthquakes, but also for things like commercial ventures. For example, having trade shows, this can be used in a very beneficial way. And I suggest that maybe an incident command system be brought into Tokyo, even for the Olympics, even in a partial way. What do you think about these ideas?
各地方自治体と米軍の連携の前にですね、日本はこの国内での連携体制ができてないんですよね。よその国では憲法にも国家緊急事態の規定があって、緊急事態が発令されれば大体軍とか警察とか消防とか民間の会社も同時にどっと救出に動ける形になって、年に1回2回訓練も行われているわけです。日本の場合は大災害があると総理大臣官邸にぞろぞろ集まってきて、さて今からどんな組織を作って救出しようかという相談から始まるわけです。これではその相談をしている間にどんどん人が亡くなるわけですよね。私はこれを改善しなきゃいけないと思っています。
In regard to your first suggestion about trying to create some kind of a coordination system between local regional governments and the different military forces, whether we're talking about the self-defense forces or the American military, I believe what's more important is, first of all, to have this on a national level. In many nations, it is part of the system that on a national level, the military, fire department, police departments, even private companies, large private companies, are supposed to coordinate in times of emergency. And in order to make sure that the system works, there are large-scale training sessions or exercises that are done maybe once or twice a year. What happens in Japan is that once a terrible disaster occurs, different people gather at the Prime Minister's office and then they begin to have discussions amongst themselves. What should we do? What kind of an organization should we put together? How should we put together rescue efforts? And while these discussions and consultations are taking place, many, many people are dying. We need to correct this system.
だから国内でですね、やっぱりその警察、消防、それから国の機関である自衛隊、民間の会社の土木会社、建設会社、運送会社とかがですね、総理大臣が災害の緊急事態ですよという発令をしたら、誰の指示がなくてもどっと動ける体制になってないとですね、やっぱりどうしてもその被害が拡大してしまうと思うんですよね。そういう体制を私は作りたいと思ってますし、そういう体制を作るのに私の自衛隊における経験がですね、他の候補者よりはずっと役に立つと思っています。
I believe, therefore, we need to put together a system in Japan so that will involve the metropolitan, the police departments, the firefighting departments, also the national organizations such as self-defense forces, also private companies such as construction companies, transportation companies. And once the system has been established, if a terrible disaster occurs, the person on top, such as the Prime Minister, will give a statement. We are now in an emergency situation. And given that one word, all of the parties will be able not to have to wait for a particular directive or particular order, but will be able to immediately begin moving on their own. This is a system that I would like to put into place, and I believe that compared to my other rival candidates, my background at the self-defense forces does give me the ability, a superior ability, to put together such a system.
あと2番目のこのインステートコマンドシステムですか、こういったものはできるだけ国内で作れるものは国内で作った方がいいと思いますね。外国のシステムを使うということはですね、中身は分かりませんから、こういうものはですね、ずっと使うということになるわけですよね。ですからその辺は中身をよく調べて、そして情報開示が全部なされて、日本でも自由に回収ができるとかいうことであれば使ってもいいかと思いますけども、もうブラックボックスがあってですね、縛られてもうお願いしなければどうしようもないというような形で導入すべきではないと思います。
In regard to the incident command system that you described, I'm not sure of the details, but my fundamental feeling about such an idea is that we should try to create Japanese systems, domestic systems, as much as possible. In other words, of course, we would have to look at the contents, but if it is something that's going to be imported from abroad, and we would have to ensure that the information would be disclosed and that we could alter it if necessary. In other words, we don't want to be bound to some kind of a black box kind of system that we cannot control.
山さん。
フリーランスの小山ですけれども、靖国参拝は賛成だということですが、その場合、中国と韓国との問題が残ると思うんですけれども、それはどうやって解決されるんでしょうか。それから尖閣諸島もですね、日中間ですごい緊張が続いているわけですけれども、この問題もどのように解決されるべきだというふうにお考えなんでしょうか。
I'm a freelancer. My name is Koyama. I'd like to ask two basic questions or related questions. You said that you support the praying or paying your respects at Yasukuni Shrine. However, that means that there will be problems with China and South Korea that remain. How do you plan to resolve these problems with these nations? And also in regard to the Senkaku Islands issue, tensions are remaining between Japan and China. Again, how do you intend to resolve this issue, these tensions?
総理の靖国参拝について中国、韓国がいろいろ言っていることはもうまさに内政干渉だと思いますね。ですからどういうふうに関係を維持しながら解決していくかは、政府が考えられると思いますけれども、私は聞かれればそんなものは内政干渉だと、総理が毎月靖国参拝すればそのうち向こうもくたびれて言わなくなると思います。
In regard to Prime Minister Abe visiting Yasukuni Shrine, I believe that comments by China and South Korea are really fall in the realm of interference or commenting upon domestic political situations, which I think is not correct. Of course, in regard to how to maintain good relations with China and South Korea, given the situation, is something I think that the national government will continue to work on. If you were going to ask me, my personal opinion is that Prime Minister Abe should visit Yasukuni Shrine each month. If he continues to do so, then I believe that China and South Korea will eventually get tired of making an issue about each visit.
中国、韓国に比べると日本の経済的立場は圧倒的に強いんですよね。中国、韓国が吹っ飛んでも日本は吹っ飛びませんけど、日本が吹っ飛べば中国も韓国も経済的に吹っ飛びますね。だからそれは中国だって韓国だって分かってると思うんですよね。ただ文句言っても日本は反撃してこないということが分かってるから、どんどん外交交渉の手段として言ってきてるだけだと私は認識しています。
In regard to China and South Korea, I believe that Japan's economic position is still much higher than these two nations. In other words, if Chinese and South Korean economies were to plummet, I think Japan would still be all right. But the reverse cannot be said to be true. I mean, if the Japanese economy plummets, then China and South Korea would find it very, very difficult indeed. The reason I believe that the Chinese and South Korean governments continue to send complaints in Japan's direction is that they know Japan really does not fight back or comment back. I believe, therefore, that these two nations are fundamentally using these issues as a tool for diplomatic means, as a means for furthering their diplomacy.
中国、韓国は輸出で成り立っている国なんですよね。輸出がなければ2つの国の経済は成り立たないんです。その輸出を成立させるためには日本からこの工業用の原料、金属、油、資本材、こういったものが継続的に金型とかで輸出されなければ今大政公共だというサムスンの経営だって成り立たないわけですよね。だからそういう強みを日本はもう韓国と中国の首の根っこをひっ捕まえているようなもんだと私は思います。
In regard to the Chinese and South Korean economies, these are economies that have been able to grow as a result of tremendous exports. Without exports, these two economies would not be able to maintain its momentum, and they are very, very aware of this. In order for them to be able to maintain their high level of exports, they are very, very dependent on many things imported from Japan, whether we're talking about metals, very high-level engineering components, also oil, also consumer goods, and capital goods, also things very basic such as molds for making different parts. A company such as Samsung, even with its tremendous backing by the South Korean government, would not be able to survive and continue and grow without this kind of support from the Japanese economy. So both nations, I believe, are very aware of the fact that Japan has a kind of chokehold on their necks of these two countries.
れから尖閣についてはですね、中国は現在支配する能力もないですから、安倍総理が自衛隊の戦力拡充と、法制の改正に乗り出してますから、これをこのまま進めればですね、永久に中国が軍事行動に出る日は来ないと思います。
In regard to the Senkaku Islands, as I mentioned earlier, China does not have the capacity at present to be able to dominate or control these islands. And on the other hand, we are seeing that Prime Minister Abe is moving forward with to change the laws and rules so that the self-defense forces would be more easily deployed in case he needs to deploy them. As a result of all of these factors, I believe that we will never see a day when China will control these islands, or excuse me, move their military to try to control these islands.
Thank you. My name is Stefano Carrer for the Italian daily Solo 24 Ore. My question is about your future plans. I mean, if you will be elected as Tokyo governor, after spending the term as governor, what will you do? I mean, is your goal or dream to become prime minister? Or if you will not be elected, what will be your next step, your next move into politics? Thanks.
はい、イタリア紙のものでございます。今後の選挙後のご予定について伺いたいと思います。知事になられましたら、その後は何を目指すんでしょうか。総理大臣の職を目指すのでございましょうか。そしてもし今回の知事選で当選しなかった場合には、次は何をお考えでございますでしょうか。また政界で新たなステップっていうのは何か考えているのでございますでしょうか。
日本の今自民党もですね、この保守派から左派までいるし、民主党はもちろんだしですね、本当は国家観とか歴史観が一致した人たちが集まった政党が必要だと思うんですね。で、日本はいわゆる中国派の政治家がいっぱいいるんですね。中国派、親中派と言われる人たちで、これに対して保守派と言われる政治家がいます。この保守派の大半は、アメリカ派なんですよね。で、日本はこの中国派とアメリカが中国の言う通りしろと、アメリカの言う通りしろというのが喧嘩しているような政治状況だと私は思っているんです。で、日本には日本派の政治家が少ないと。で、中国、アメリカと日本の国益が一致するわけないわけですから、やっぱり日本のことを心底考える日本派の政治家が集まった政党ができなければ、私は日本の国益を今後21世紀守っていくことはだんだん難しくなるんではないかと思うんですね。で、なんか私がこう言うとすごい国粋主義者みたいに思われるかもしれない。そんなことはないですよ。私は別に中国やアメリカと喧嘩しろと言ってるわけではなくて、仲良くしなきゃいけないけれどもですね、やっぱり国際政治というのは本当は腹黒ですから、信じる者は騙されるという世界ですからですね、その辺はよく分かって、日本の国益を守るという政治家が集まった政党を誕生させるような政治運動を続けていきたいというふうに思っています。
I believe when we look at the existing political parties in Japan, whether we're looking at the LDP or the DPJ, we see that they have a wide range of members, people who fall into the very conservative camp to people who are very left-leaning. I believe, therefore, we need eventually to have political parties that are centered around the same kind of values or same kind of beliefs, the same kind of views about the nation, about history, etc. When I look at the political spectrum in Japan, I think that the large majority of politicians either fall into the China camp or the U.S. camp, the people who very much support the views of China or the people who very much support the views of the United States. What I think is missing in the political arena is people who fall in the Japan camp, in other words, politicians who think first and foremost about the national interests of this nation. Because to be very frank, the national interests of Japan cannot be exactly equal to the national interests of China or to the national interests of the United States. I believe that unless we are able to develop a party, a group of people who think from the bottom of their hearts about, first and foremost, the interests of Japan, we will not be able to survive this 21st century. Whenever I make a statement like this, some people immediately assume that I'm being very, very right-wing or very, very overly patriotic or overly nationalistic, but that is not the position that I'm taking at all. I'm not saying we should fight China or we should fight anyone else. What I'm saying is that we must, of course, try to develop amicable friendly relations with these nations as much as possible, but we must keep our own national interest in mind. To be very frank, the world of international politics is a place where everyone has, and the direct translation was everyone has a dark belly underneath. What I mean by that is that if you take what someone says at face value and believe it, you will end up probably being deceived. You must understand the realities, the harsh realities of international politics.
世界を見ればですね、アメリカの政治家はみんなアメリカ派ですよ。イギリスはイギリス派、フランスはフランス派、中国は中国派なんですね。でも日本だけ日本派の政治家が少ないということが日本の大問題なんです。
If you look at the world, you see that most politicians in the United States are thinking about U.S. interests, and most politicians in England are thinking about UK interests, and the same for France, the same for China. It's only Japan, being a very unusual country in the world, is that there are very few people who think about Japan's interests first. This, I think, is a huge problem facing our nation.
Thank you. If I take that chance to ask a question, you mentioned in your presentation or in answer that main Japanese media don't want you to win these elections. And when I was yesterday in Ginza, I saw so many cameramen from various Japanese TVs covering the alliance of former prime ministers, Mr. Koizumi and Mr. Hosokawa. So why do you think the Japanese media are against you to win? Thank you.
先ほどのお話の中では日本の主流なメディアはあんまり玉込さんを勝たせたくないと思っているというふうにおっしゃったんでございますが、なぜそう思われるんでしょうか。実は昨日私も銀座に参りましたんでございますが、やはり多くのカメラマン報道陣は2人の元首相の写真をたくさん撮ってたと思うんですが、なぜそういうようなことになると思いますでしょうか。なぜ玉込様を勝たせたくないというふうに思うんでしょうか。
私の名前がね、宣伝されるようなことにはなかなかなりませんよね。で、私が体感をすることになった時の論文もですね、私は日本はいい国だったという論文を書いたんですね。そしたらこれがもうマスコミで寄ってたかって叩かれるわけですよね。こんなこと日本以外の国では起きないですよ。自分の国を褒めて公職を追われる国なんて世界中探したって日本しかないですよ。メディアが私はおかしいと思いますよ。
As you know, my name is not generally associated with very a positive image in Japan. As you know, I had to leave my post as the head of the Air Self-Defense Forces because of a paper that I wrote. And the paper I wrote basically focused on the idea that Japan is a good nation. That was the fundamental theme of the paper. However, as a result, I was battered by the media. And I think there is no other nation in the world where if you write a paper saying my country is a good country, then you would be forced out of public office. I think the media there's something wrong with the media.
Thank you.
国民新聞論説委員の藤田と申します。玉込閣下と私の関係はですね、結構バレバレでして2年ほど前に結婚式の時の乾杯の温度をですね、玉込閣下にしていただきました。急なお願いで大変恐縮だったんですが、福島出身ということで、実を言いますと、被災地のですね首長の方々、それから菅直と当時の首相ですね、来ていろいろ記者会見されました。で、首長の方々にですね、皆さんこの、例えば今ですと2800名以上の方々が死亡されてますけど、その放射線で亡くなった方いるんですかと聞いたら、いや、いないと。避難することによってやはり死んだ方が多いんじゃないかと言っておられました。で、菅直と元首相にはですね、今放射線は低放射線は人体に悪いどころか健康にいいという、そういう科学的な、主張される方もいると。そういうことをご存知ですかと聞きましたら、いや、低放射線が科学的に、健康にいいという話は聞いていると。ただ避難させたのは万が一の場合に光線量放射線を懸念して避難させたんだと、そういう話だったんですね。しかし実際ですね、今福島を考えてみても、そんな大騒ぎをしてですね避難をするほどの光線量の放射線はないわけですね。にもかかわらず、まるで何か 極端に言うとですね、お化けのようなその放射線を恐れてですね、大変な方向にもしかして日本行こうとしてるんじゃないかというふうに思うんですけれども、その辺今後ですね、日本の舵取りですよね、大きな舵取りですが、どういう方向に向かっていくべきかと思うでしょうか。
My name is Fushita from the Kokumin newspaper. I do have a personal relationship with our speaker. 2 years ago at my wedding, he offered to give a toast, even though it was a very sudden request. Thank you very much. You mentioned earlier that you were from Fukushima, and we have had, since the earthquake and nuclear disaster, many press conferences on this theme. We've had Prime Minister Khan. We've had the heads of different cities and towns and other prefectures come and speak. And I've asked several questions of the speakers. For example, I asked how many people actually died from the radioactivity emitted by the nuclear power plant accident, and the answer is none. People have died as a result of trying to evacuate from the radioactive materials. I also asked a question of Mr. Khan. How many people did you know that there are some scientists who are saying that there are some possible positive benefits from being exposed to low levels of radiation? And he said he had heard about these matters, but when he was in power, his fundamental idea was to have people evacuate in case there were very, very damaging very high levels of radiation. However, we've seen that in Fukushima there have not been that high levels of radiation. In other words, there is this idea that perhaps these people were evacuated needlessly, and as a result, some people lost their lives as a result of this evacuation. What I'm getting at is that it might be that Japan is again facing a similar situation in that we're trying to evacuate or go into a very specific direction because we're afraid of this kind of amorphous ghost that we think of as radioactivity. So I have fears that perhaps Japan is not facing the right direction. If you were to dare to take the rudder, in which direction would you steer Japan in the future?
あの時のですね、やっぱり菅政権の対応が今の日本の放射能恐怖症状態を作ったと思うんですよね。年間20ミリの放射線を浴びる地域に住む人たちは逃げろということで強制避難させられたわけです。でこれ ICRP の基準では年間20から100の放射線を浴びる地域の人は避難させた方がいいですよという勧告があるんですよね。これに従うかどうかはそれぞれ各国の判断ですけれども、あれは真ん中の60を取れば福島県民は誰一人避難する必要もなかったし、20から100ということは、100までは避難しなくてもいいですよということですよね。それを一番厳しい20ミリを取って避難しろと言ったわけです。菅政権がちょうど外国人からの献金問題で倒れそうでしたから、問題のすり替えを行ったと私は思うんですね。皆さん私を責めてる場合じゃありませんよと、福島が大変です。だからみんなで一生懸命福島に対応しましょう。私の問題は少ししばらく置いとってくださいということだったと思うんですよね。
At the time, what Prime Minister Khan did, I think his actions basically set the stage for this situation we find ourselves in now. In other words, people are almost hypochondriacally or overly fearful of the effects of radiation. At the time, the evacuation order, which was an obligatory evacuation order, was given for people living in areas that received 20 milliliters. 20 millisieverts of radiation per year on an annual basis. When we look at the international standards, the ICRP standards, they say for areas where people are living, which receives 20 to 100 millisieverts of radiation per year, there is a recommendation that they be warned to evacuate. However, it's not obligatory, and it is up to the local regional governments as to whether they want to evacuate those people or not. Even if we take the middle figure, 60 millisieverts, this was for Fukushima, there was no need to evacuate these people. 20 to 100 is still more or less safe. It's a wide range, and you saw that the Prime Minister Khan took the very lowest level, 20 millisieverts, and made this huge evacuation effort. My personal analysis of what happened was that you may recall at that time Prime Minister Khan was being pressured because he was facing a problem of having received political contributions from a person who was not of Japanese citizenship, which is, of course, against the election rules. And in a way to divert attention from his problem, he wanted to make a big thing out of Fukushima. He basically was saying, we can't spend time worrying about my contribution problems. We have this huge, horrible situation in Fukushima. We must focus all of our attention on this.
私は友人がですね、この強制避難させられたことによって、家はなくなる、家畜は失う、農作物は失う、もう生活めちゃくちゃですよね。そういっためちゃくちゃな生活、また今度風評被害でですね、その福島の米が売れない、牛肉が売れないとかですね、もう顔の知ってる人たちがそういうことで苦しんでいる風評被害でですね、だから私は放射能とか原発についてですね、一昨年半年間専門家について勉強したんです。私もよく分からなかったけども、そしたらですね、そんなに今は放射線の専門家が言ってることは日本政府が取った対応ってほとんどそんな対応必要ないということが分かってきたんですよね。今放射能に対する認識はこの第二の歴史認識でですね、日本は歴史認識を克服しなきゃいけませんけれども、放射能に対する認識が第二の歴史認識でまた日本の弱体化にこれ徹底的に利用されます。だからこの原因を作ったのは民主党政権なんですよね。
I have a friend from Fukushima who, as a result of this evacuation order, ended up losing his home, losing all of his livestock, losing all of his agricultural products, his plants, crops, etc. And after things settled down, he faced a new round of suffering in that he was hurt by the negative rumors, so that, in other words, people saying that products, for example, cow meat, beef, rice from Fukushima were tainted with radioactivity. Therefore, he found again in a situation where he was unable to sell his products. So these are the sufferings not of just sort of general people, the people that I know by face, by name. I believe that this is an important issue, and as a result, realizing that I did not have the technical background to understand radioactivity very well, I spent 6 months last year studying with a radio activity or radiation expert to learn more about these matters. And the result of my studies is that the Japanese government did not need to take some of the extreme measures that it took. In fact, most of the measures it took were unnecessary and actually caused more harm. Quite often we talk about the awareness of history and whether one has a correct awareness of history or understanding of history or a mistaken understanding of history. And of course we mean that to talk about war issues. But I believe that this Fukushima radiation area is a second area where Japan is now being burdened by a mistaken, wrong understanding of history. In other words, I believe that this mistaken understanding of history is going to be another way in which Japan is going to be used as a tool again to make Japan suffer.
例えば日本のですね、この飲料水に含まれていい放射能の基準というのが1リットルあたり10ベクレルと言われてるんですよね。これ民主党政権下で決められたんですけども、福島で今高濃度汚染水といってよく福島原発から汚染水が漏れますけどもですね、これ基準が病的に厳しいからですね、汚染水になるんです。この間通常この数値を言わないんですけど NHK が初めてニュースでですね、1リットルあたり190ベクレルのストロンチウムを含んだ高濃度汚染水と言いました。だから基準値の19倍の放射能ストロンチウムを含む高濃度汚染水ということです。だけどよその国の基準はどうだ。アメリカは1リットルあたり1200です。ヨーロッパは1リットルあたり1000です。日本は100倍以上厳しいんですよね。だから汚染水になるんです。だから福島の汚染水1リットル190ベクレルの放射能を含んでてもヨーロッパやアメリカであれで普通にコーヒー飲んでますよね。
I would like to explain that this very bad situation was created by the Democratic Party of Japan while they were in power. Just to give you an example of what I'm speaking about, we look at the standards for water contamination. For drinking water, the amount of radiation has to be less than 10 becquerels per 1 liter of water. And this was a standard that was put together by the DPJ. I would like to call your attention to another kind of water that is gaining a great deal of attention. This is the high level of radiation contaminated water that is leaking from the nuclear power plant in Fukushima. For a long time, the numbers were not specifically given. However, recently, NHK gave the actual figures, and the kind of water that is considered to be contaminated water with high radioactivity is 190 becquerels with strontium per liter of water. In other words, it's 19 times as much gaining as much radiation as the drinking water. So again, 10 becquerels per liter of drinking water, 190 becquerels per liter for this contaminated water that we hear about in Fukushima. When we look at the rest of the world, however, what are the different standards? In the United States, 1,200 becquerels per liter of water is all right. And in Europe, the standard is a little bit more severe. It's 1,000 becquerels per liter of water. What I'm saying is that our standards are more than 100 times as strict as in these other nations. So the kind of water that we're seeing, the contaminated water we're seeing leaking from Fukushima nuclear power plant, this kind of water could be used in the United States and Europe for making coffee.
Thank you very much. I think this wraps up our event. Thank you, Tamogami Sensei, for your insights and your statements. And we'd like to tell you that we the foreign journalists, we don't take action or take position against anybody. We treat everybody fairly here, especially in this club. I would like to offer you one honorary membership for 1 year. If you win, please come back here and attend. We have a lot of activities here. Thank you very much.
私が本当に穏やかでいい人だということがよく分かっていただけたのではないかと思います。ありがとうございます。
I hope you were able to go away with the impression that I am a very gentle and kind and good person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please remain seated until our guest leaves the room. Thank you for attending today. Have a nice evening.